moving on to our next participant, Jackson Hinkle. Jackson, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hello.
Hi. Yes. Hi. So Jackson Hinkle, multi-million follower on X, but probably more famous for being banned by YouTube. Over to you, Jackson.
Thank you. And thank you to the professors for being here. And I'm in Moscow right now. I think I'm maybe one of the only people that has both of the professors' books in English here in Moscow. But I mean, anyways, my question is regarding Trump's promise to place very harsh tariffs on any countries pursuing de-dollarization and arguably sovereignty. Unfortunately, a lot of the countries pursuing de-dollarization are flirting with multipolarity. Bar China and Russia have a ruling class that still maintain an interest in the expansion of their private capital at the expense of, pushing for sovereignty for their countrymen. So do you guys think that this tariff policy will increase America's power on the global stage and risk the ideal of multipolarity and further sovereignty? Or do you think it will backfire, as President Putin and Dmitry Peskov have put forward?
I'm not an expert on this subject, so I'll not say too much on it. My sense is that Donald Trump has a powerful tendency to talk like a tough guy. And I think it's very easy to talk that way when you're not in power. But when he starts talking about levying all these tariffs on countries all around the world, we don't want to lose sight of the fact that those tariffs, if he were to impose them, are going to have significant consequences for the American economy. And those consequences are not going to be good. And you want to remember that one of the principal reasons that Donald Trump got elected is because the American economy is not in good shape, at least from the perspective of the bottom half of the society. There are lots of people who are having a very difficult time scraping together enough money to pay for their rent and to put food on the table. And these people voted in droves for Donald Trump. So Donald Trump, when he comes into office, has a deep-seated interest in making sure that the American economy flourishes under him and that those people who are in the bottom half of the society do very well and are able to put food on the table and find affordable housing. This really matters. And if Trump doesn't deliver, he's going to be in a lot of trouble. Now, everything I read about tariffs, and again, this isn't my area of expertise, and a lot of Trump's hard-headed economic policies tell me that if he goes ahead and executes all these policy proposals that are floating around, he's going to hurt the American economy. He may hurt other economies as well. He may hurt the Russian economy, or he may hurt the economies of countries X, Y, and Z, which is his intention, because those countries didn't do what he wanted. But he's also going to do damage inside the United States. And this is not going to be good. And therefore, I think that he is not going to act on his rhetoric. And I underline the word think. One can never be certain with Trump. But I do not think he is going to end up acting as harshly with regard to tariffs as he's now talking, simply because of the economic consequences at home.
To answer the question, I am not as well. I'm not an expert on the tariffs or an economy, but theoretically, I'm rather the advocate of autarky. So economic independence and sovereignty and financial sovereignty of all great civilizational states. So in my opinion, if, for example, Trump would put tariffs on some BRICS countries that will not behave themselves as in line with the hegemony of dollar, that will save their economy. So that will make good for them and maybe for American economy as well. So I strongly believe that we should not only have political or strategical multipolarity, but as well financial or economic multipolarity. So we need to be sovereign on the level of our economy. And if Trump tries to save a kind of financial hegemony of dollar, is for the first it is his total right. He could threat the other, but we are under sanctions already. Russia is trying to exploit its inner potential, and the sanctions put on us, they are a kind of the only way to restore our independence. So we are very grateful for the West to put the sanctions on us. And if we will be cut from dollar system, we will be much more grateful. So I think that means that threat pass on tangent to us. And if someone really has fear of Trump making tariffs against their economies, in the future they are globalists. They are just liberals being part of this global system. So let him do that. So I will be very grateful to Trump to cut the economic relations from the powers participating in this division of labor on the global level. That is the way, in my opinion, to exploit more and to prevent the people really to develop their own inner potential. So I see no threat in that. I would be very grateful. I think that the hegemony of dollar should end. And if Trump thinks differently, it is all his right. Let us try multipolarity on the financial and currency level. So there could not be the real multipolarity without financial sovereignty of the poles. That is challenge to China. That is challenge to Russia. That is challenge to all other emerging superpower, emerging poles. And I think that, but better to threat us with that than with nuclear weapons. I think that the Trump in general is the chance. It is the chance for us, for America to be great again, to China, to the world, to anybody. The chance. It is not the gift. He will not give us nothing as a gift. He is not a kind of savior of the humanity. He is just the chance. And if we are smart enough, if we are strong enough, if we are convinced enough to use this chance, we will be the winners in that sense. And that could be this time win-win strategy for the United States. So let Trump to try to do what he wants. I wouldn't prevent him from doing anything, bad or good. Let him try, because that is the chance for all of us. Biden is zero chance. Kamala Harris is the same. We know what is it. We know what that was, and we could presume what it will be. With Trump is a kind of history once more open. So I think that is very, very challenging. I applaud Trump and his team. It is a bit crazy, spontaneous, inconsequent, but that is something new. So that is the fresh air in the world with Trump. I enjoy the posting of Elon Musk, for example, recent one, the cancel culture should be cancelled. So you could not say better. So that is that we wish from all our hearts that to end, to be cancelled. We want these globalist guys out of the scene, and we are ready to experience everything, every alternative that United States could imagine. So I think that is so better than what we had before. So we shouldn't be too much serious in our relations. Let them try. Let them try to make America once great again. Let them try to avoid the conflict. Let them try to pacify Russia and Ukraine. It is impossible. We know that, but let them try. Let them try to put the sanctions and tariffs against everybody who challenge the imperialism of dollar. Let them try. That is very, very interesting, very, very challenging. And I think that we should say, oh, we all have already seen that. No, we never have seen that. That is something new, and let it be like that. Let it be. Let it happen. Let the globalists flee from United States to Canada, and Canada to turn into 51st state of United States. Let them try to do for doggy what Vivek and Elon Musk want to do. That is totally crazy, and that is why it is so beautiful. I think let them try. When I see Kash Patel, I couldn't believe my eyes. So that could be real. So what this strange guy says, that is very, very exciting. I think all the rest, but more or less, the rest that is going on in the future nominees of Trump. So let these people try to improve something, and I think all the rest will depend on the realism or strategical depth of what will happen, but they have the right to start something anew.
小 Q 老师, he is a political commentator, comments. Yeah. Oh, there is the picture. Hi. So thank you very much for staying with us, because Mr. Little Q, that's his online name, he is in Australia at the moment. He comments on international relations, and particularly a lot of them are about the functioning of the United Nations. So with that, 小 Q 老师，您请说。
Thank you. So I have two questions, but connected, so it will be quick. So the first question will be for great powers. If power competition is inevitable, in which areas do you see this competition most important? Will you primarily focus on military power, or economic dominance, or cultural influence, or technological development? So which of these areas do you believe will take priority in shaping the global balance of power? So the second question is for other actors, the small and middle powers. How should small and middle powers navigate the increasing tensions between great powers, especially in the context of Middle East, Ukraine, and the situation today we see?
I guess I can start just with regard to the first question, with regard to what areas do a security competition mainly focus on? I think it's obvious, if you think about the US-China security competition, that underneath that concept of security, right, underneath the umbrella of the word security competition, you have a military competition, and this is what containment is all about. And furthermore, you have a competition for power. Both sides are interested in what the balance of power looks like, and both sides are interested in having a favorable balance of power. So at the military level, again, you have containment from an American perspective, and you have also concern about the balance of power on both sides. But there's a very important economic dimension to this security competition. It's not just military. And the reason for that is that economic might, economic power, economic wherewithal is the basis of military might. You have to have a powerful economy to build a powerful military. So there's an economic competition that takes place. And today in the contemporary world, that competition focuses mainly on cutting edge technologies. The United States, as is very clear, is deeply concerned about the fact that China looks like it may have the ability to beat the United States in the competition for developing high-end technologies. So when you look at the US-China security competition, you see that there are two main areas of competition. One is the military, and two is cutting-edge technologies. So I would answer your first question by focusing on those two areas of competition. With regard to your second question about how the smaller states in the system navigate the competition that takes place between the great powers, I think there's not much more to say that you want to do everything you can to make sure you don't get caught in the crossfire. You may be forced in some cases to ally with one great power rather than the other. And in such a case, if you're allied with a great power, you want to go to great lengths to make that great power behave as responsibly as possible, to get that great power to act in ways that are in your interest. But I think if you don't find yourself in a situation where you have to ally with one of the great powers, what you want to do is do everything possible to remain on the sideline, to not get involved, because great powers are ruthless. And when they get into a security competition with each other, they behave in ruthless ways. And as a minor power or even a major power, but not a great power, you have a vested interest in staying out of the way as much as possible. So that would be my advice to, any minor power or major power in dealing with the great power rivalries that we now see in the world.
Thank you.
Maybe I would add some points only. I agree with this advice, and I think that small power and middle power, maybe they could become the key to the multipolarity, because on their art to have the balance, to not provoke great powers, to not let to be used by great powers as a tool, as an object. From that depends the global balance. So I think that small and middle powers could play in constructing, in the process of constructing multipolar world, very important role as a kind of setters of some balances on the regional levels. For example, Nepal as the country tries to combine interest of the great China and great India in this region. So Ukraine could be a real bridge, a real and very important and powerful small power or middle power in establishing the geopolitical balance between Eurasia, Russia, and the Europe. But when you, or the same, the reason of color revolutions of the post-Soviet space is precisely the same, to use these small and not really sovereign powers to make them serve to one powers, of the superpowers, and after that to sacrifice them, to get them away because they are not the real subjects. And the agreements were there; they are nothing in eyes of the superpowers. So you could easily to get them out, to throw them out into the trash because they are not subject. If you really master of the global politics, being small and being middle-sized, you could play very important role in defining the main power force line of the global politics. That was the idea of Nicholas Spickman, who has emphasized the role of Rimland in the geopolitics, insisting that Rimland, so borderlines, the frontiers on the global scale, could play key role in establishing balance, peace or provoking war between great civilizations. So I think we shouldn't underestimate these small and middle scale powers. In a multipolar world, they could be regarded as a frontiers of the great importance, and we need to pay attention for them.
Next is Chris Young. Now, Chris is a long-term friend of ours, and he's a senior editor with guancha.cn, which is arguably the most influential and active political news website here in China. So, Chris, over to you.
Hi, thank you, Shirley, and thank you, both professors. I've enjoyed every minute of it. I have a very long question, but I want to shorten it as much as possible. So, because I'm most interested in the paradigm or the framework by which we examine the world dynamics. So I want to ask both of you, are we going to witness a new age of empires? Because just now, I believe it was Professor Dugin who said he believed a pole is not a nation state. And Professor Mearsheimer said a pole is a great power, basically to say it's not a civilization, not Muslim civilization, so it's not a civilizational empire. But I think that's one of what I view to be one of your key differences between both of you. I believe Professor Mearsheimer is grounded in scientific modernity, which you view the basis of nation states, basically rational actors pursuing power maximization. Whereas Professor Dugin, it seems to me that you're saying that bigger states, their subjective view of their existential threats and national interest could trump those of smaller states like Russia's, because the Baltic states, obviously they will have their subjective fear of Russia to some extent, but there was this very asymmetric power structure because power is so imbalanced. So their concern is limited to more oblivious to the international community. I'm sort of like making this as a comment, but I want to try to ask you about the future by which we can examine world affairs. How can international relations theory adapt to new world dynamics? Because I believe one of Professor Mearsheimer's lament is the U.S. wasn't realist enough, and in that unipolar moment, U.S. could afford the luxury to not to be realist enough. I'm not sure about the future, so I want to ask you about the future. Do you think we are going to see an age of empires? If that's the case, what's going the international relations be like?
I'll give you my view on the future of empires. And of course, a lot depends on how you define an empire. In my lexicon, in my understanding of international politics, an empire is when a particular country controls the territory of controls large chunks of territory in other areas of the world. We once had a British Empire. We once had a French Empire, a Belgian Empire. There was once an Ottoman Empire. If you look at Turkey today, that Turkey, when it was the Ottoman Empire, controlled almost all of the Middle East. And indeed, that Ottoman Empire extended up into southeastern Europe. Those were empires. The Austro-Hungarian Empire is another example. In my opinion, empires are no more, and there are not going to be any more empires. This is not to say they're not powerful states in the system, great powers like the United States that have huge influence in Europe and in East Asia. I fully understand that. But that's not an empire in my understanding of the world. And the reason that all of those empires disappeared, the British Empire, the French Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, they all disappeared because of nationalism. I believe that nationalism is the most powerful political ideology on the planet. And when a great power tries to conquer territory and control it, it runs into nationalism and it gets into a huge amount of trouble. This is what happened to the Bush Doctrine. What was President Bush trying to do? President Bush was trying to do social engineering in the Middle East at the end of a rifle barrel. He thought that he could invade countries like Afghanistan, like Iraq, and eventually even maybe Syria and Iran, and he could do social engineering. We could determine what those countries would look like politically. We could influence their political order. You cannot do this in the age of nationalism. The people of Afghanistan don't want the British, they don't want the Soviet Union, and they don't want the Americans coming in and telling them what their political order should look like. Professor Dugan, much earlier in the conversation, emphasized the importance of the concept of sovereignty. Sovereignty is all about self-determination. Peoples all over the world want to determine their own future. They don't want the United States or the Soviet Union or any other country coming in, violating their sovereignty, right? And what this is really all about is nationalism. Nationalism says, I will decide my own fate. And I pointed out before that the Soviet Union, in its heyday, occupied all of Eastern Europe. And it had huge trouble governing Eastern Europe. And the reason is nationalism. Poles, Czechs, Hungarians, East Germans did not want the Soviet Union telling them how to run their politics. You could do that a long time ago, before nationalism came on the scene. Nationalism is a relatively new ideology. It really doesn't begin to show its face until the late 1700s, and then it begins to flower in the 1800s. And those big empires that we read about in the history books were all created before the coming of nationalism. But once nationalism comes, and once nationalism becomes a really powerful force, it becomes almost impossible to create an empire. And in my story, it becomes almost impossible to invade another country, to occupy it, and to try to influence its politics in a meaningful way. One last story on this. When I was young, I was in the American military between 1965 and 1975, which was coterminous with the Vietnam War. During that war, many people argued in the beginning that the Americans were fighting against communism. This was US liberal democracy, capitalism versus communism. But it eventually became clear to most Americans, certainly to me, that what we were up against was not communism. We were up against Vietnamese nationalism. It was that same nationalism that finished off the French at Dien Bien Phu in 1954, right? It finished off the Americans in 1975. You do not want to invade a country like Vietnam because the Vietnamese are incredibly nationalist. The Chinese, by the way, found this out in 1979. So again, nationalism is a remarkably powerful force. And that's why we live in a world of nation states. And in that world of nation states, you do have great powers. And those great powers sometimes have enormous influence. We all agree this is true with the United States. But the United States cannot create an empire like those empires of the past, the British Empire, the French Empire, and so forth and so on. And in my story, it cannot even invade countries, occupy them, and try to run their politics. That too is a prescription for disaster. So nationalism, in a very important way, limits what great powers can do. I often argue, and this is my final point, that the two forces in the modern world that put the greatest limits on great powers, and this includes the United States, are number one, nuclear weapons, and number two, nationalism. I've just told you the nationalism story, and the nuclear weapons story has come out here in my exchanges with Professor Dugan. We both have made clear that nuclear war is a real possibility. That's something you want to avoid. And that tends to make countries much more cautious than otherwise would be the case.
偷偷告诉大家，我最近发现了新法宝 Royal Face 逆时奇迹系列，它有活肤露、全效精华，还有精华霜。尤其我皮肤比较偏干，所以我非常的注重保湿。保湿做得好，肌肤自然烹润。提亮肤色更年轻，抚平皱纹超有感，而且气色变好。用心保养，每天都更美一点。美吧。